Hello, everyone. Welcome to Momming and Thriving. Today, I have one of my favorite people in the world, extraordinary doctor, my personal doctor, my one and only sister. And when I say sister, I don't mean sister like, oh, yeah, we're close and yeah, she's my sister. No, she is literally my only sister. Same mom, same dad. I don't have another one. And not just my sister, one of my best friends, someone that's been with me through thick and thin, and it's just a pleasure to have her today because for the topic we're about to discuss, I thought who else but someone that is actually trained in this area. So, everyone, with my sister, very welcome. Welcome, Shola. Welcome, Dr. Shola. Sorry, I corrected
Oh,
myself. Welcome, Dr. Shola.
thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. This is so fun. We've been planning about doing this for a while, but life happened. So I'm excited to be
Life
here and talk.
happened. We would mention the big thing that happened recently.
Oh,
Life
yeah.
happened, but I'm so glad that we're here now. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell my listeners a little bit about you.
Let's see. Let's keep it simple. I'm a child of God. I'm a wife. I'm a mother to two littles. I have a 2-month-old and a 5-year-old, and I'm a general pediatrician. I absolutely, love what I do. I love my family, and that's all I'm about, really. Love family and my career. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, congratulations on your newborn, my niece.
Yes,
And I can't wait
so
to hold
cute.
her and give her lots of kisses and hugs. But yeah, your hands have been full. You've been extremely busy. So definitely appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Now, before we go into the topic for today, do you have any gist of the week? So the gist of the week is just anything that's happened that's been funny or a life lesson or something you've learned from that's happened that you can share.
Life nowadays is just surrounding these kids. I'm on maternity leave, which is good because you get to spend more time, sleepless nights plus, but still enjoy my kids. And I've noticed a few things that I probably didn't notice before. My 5-year-old was trying to call his dad the other day, and he was like, "Daddy, Daddy." His dad did not respond. He said, "Babe." His dad did not respond. It said, "TJ." His dad did not respond. He said, "Ola." So he goes through all the names. I call his dad a different emotions.
Mm.
The endearing one, the one when I'm kind of upset, when I'm impatient. He goes through all of them just to get his dad's attention. And I'm like, oh my God, these kids are very smart. They listen to you when you don't realize they are. And they
Mhm.
can tell, even intonation in my voice when I call these names. He was going through all of it. So it was just hilarious. We all looked at each other and laughed,
Wow.
because we couldn't believe what we were hearing. And his dad had to respond to him, obviously, because it was so funny. But yeah, I guess that's a lesson. Be careful what you say around your kids.
Be careful what you say around your kids because they are like sponges. And I think also
Hmm.
senses, even if they may not be able to communicate as much as we do, they feel more. I think they feel more and they able to pick up on cues that we may think that they're a child, they wouldn't understand those cues. But even in terms, like you said, intonation, and that's
Yeah.
actually happened to me as well, where my son was like, babe, because I call my husband babe. And then obviously when I'm a bit angry, I just call him by his name. So they actually pick up on these things. Oh
Yep.
my God. Yeah. That's definitely something to pay attention to. So for me, my gist of the week actually kind of ties into what we're about to discuss today. So it was early in the morning. We were rushing out, trying to do the school run. I was dressing up. The boys were dressing up, and I just started hearing this loud banging. But I was just hearing it was so loud, and I was thinking to myself, why would they be making so much noise so early in the morning? Because this is something that's been ongoing, and I've been telling them, okay, your sister is asleep, the
Mm.
neighbors are asleep. Try and be quiet when you're getting ready for school. In a split second, I kind of just said, stop that. And I used like a really harsh word, like a bad word. And this is something that I do not do. And as soon as I did that, I was just like, okay. So I got
Mm.
ready and I got into the car. So my 6-year-old was like, Mommy, you've never said that before. You
Oh.
used the bad word. I thought. So initially, I wanted to get defensive and like, "Whoa, you shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be banging early in the morning." And he said, "Well, you shouldn't have said that." I said, "Well, I didn't use the bad word. I asked if you were," and he said, "Mom, no, mommy, you're not meant to." And I was
Wow.
like, "Wow." So at that moment, I caught myself. I said, "Okay, Tony, don't do the typical." African thing where you just
Mm-hmm.
talk over it. I was like, okay, boys, I'm very sorry. I really
Mm,
shouldn't have. I was frustrated. This is not me. Like you said, it's not
mm,
something I do. I'm very sorry. And I didn't mean to do that. And please, I will appreciate if you guys don't make
mm.
so much noise in the morning because it gets mommy really, really angry. And I said, well, then someone said something about being a grown up. I said, oh, grown ups make mistakes all the time. Grown ups are not perfect. So
Yeah,
it ended up being a good teachable moment. But it's just,
absolutely.
I'm so glad I didn't allow my pride to give an excuse or gloss over it. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
just had to just humble myself and apologize. And I'm glad also that even though he's 6, he's able to call me out on my
Mm-hmm.
nonsense, because that's something that, growing up sometimes they said, oh, you shouldn't express yourself, or you should not, so we bottle things in, and then that just we end up being not confident or not able to express ourselves. So I'm glad even though he's 6, he's able to say, okay, mom, you weren't meant to say that. And I was okay. I put my hands
I'm
up and
telling you,
said,
that's
I'm
what I love
sorry.
about these kids. They're so honest. They're
They're
honest and they
honest
call
and they
you
will
out
tell
and they don't
you.
have filters, you
They
know.
don't. They don't. So that was my gist of the week. Yeah, a bit of a humbling one, but yeah, it's
It's
making
good.
me
Good.
address this lashing out that happened. So now, do you remember any story? So before we get into the tough topic, or not tough topic, but important things we're going to discuss today, do you have any funny stories or anything about me or you from our
Mm.
childhood days that you remember?
I guess nothing particularly comes to mind except my pet name. Will I even call it a pet name? Which I would not mention because it's not flattering. I just don't understand how your childhood brain came up with a name like that, which has stayed for the rest of my life, will stay for the rest of my life.
Yeah, it will. It will stay
Don't,
pretty much for
please
the
do
rest
not
of your life,
mention,
because
do
I
not
will pretty
mention that
much call
name.
you this. Now you're gonna make my listeners curious. I'm gonna start getting DMs asking me what is the pet name,
Oh
because
no,
you've
that
put it
name,
out there now. They're going to
I
send
would
me
say
messages.
this. I would say this. It's an endearing name. It name has character, but it also puts like 5 pounds on me of weight when it's mentioned. But that's all people need to know. But I guess that's just interesting how your mind came up with something as random as that with no link to anything, but that's just stayed and it's just an endearing name. Makes me feel warm, make me feel understood, make me feel safe with just a word. Anyway, so I would have to give you kudos for that because you're man creative, right?
That's me. I've always been that way. Okay, so in 2018, you matched, as you called it, and you are now a US board certified pediatrician. What has that been like for you?
Oh man. Ugh, I mean, you've had a front row seat to this, so you've seen the ups and downs and the struggles, but it's a childhood dream that I've always wanted for a long time. And matching and getting into residency was like more like a breath of fresh air. It's like climbing a mountain and getting to the top, looking at the scenery as like I've made it, right? But then
Mm-hmm.
again, you look up and there's more mountains to climb. It's a scenario where I felt like so much work into it in that moment, and I mean, it was a celebration for sure, but it's just a stepping stone for another stage in life. But yeah, it was a family celebration, and I mean, we joke about the family having an MD in emotional support. It's no joke because it feels like I wouldn't have gone into medical school without you guys. So it's not just my accomplishment; it really is a family accomplishment, which I feel like I'm just very lucky and blessed to have you guys. So yeah.
Now we're lucky and blessed to have you, because we get all these free consultations now,
I need to
Payback.
start charging. I need to
Payback.
start charging people.
No, 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 no. But I remember it being very, very tough. How old were you then, actually, when you graduated? Because just to give people context of how long the process took. So how old were you
I
when you
was
actually started working as a qualified doctor?
27, was 27, yes. 27 when I graduated, and that's the same year I had my first child.
Mm-hmm.
It's a long process. This is why I say, doing it for the money is not worth it because there are easier ways to make money. But for me, medicine was a calling and I just had to push through it. The US system is very different, like, 4 years of, bachelor's degree, 4 years of med school, and then you're an MD, but you still have to go through at least 3 years of residency before you can practice independently, which is a lot longer than I think the UK. I took a year off, to finish my
And you
master's
did
in
your
between. So
master's.
it was even
Yeah.
longer for me. Actually, I took 2 years off. Now I remember I took a year after bachelor's degree. I have two failed MCAT, which is a medical college admission test, and I was losing it. Remember that I had to go take time for myself and figure out my passion for Christ before before I had to pick up the dream again. I had to literally let the dream go for a year and then pick it up again, because then I knew it was what God definitely wanted for me. So you know the story. It's just been a
Mhm.
season of, even if you were sure about something, it doesn't mean it's gonna be perfect, right? Ups and downs and different, turns to where I am today. So we're grateful to God.
So, what would you say are the highs and lows of being a doctor in the US?
Oh, medicine is broad, right? And different specialties, different day-to-day stuff, But for me specifically, I think that, like, it goes back to me saying how I feel like my job is almost a calling, which makes it easier to do, because the eyes for me is just these kids. The scripture I think about them on a daily is, "Let little children come unto me," right? For theirs is the kingdom of God. When Jesus was saying that,
Mm,
so anytime I see these kids, it's almost like they are the kingdom of God, right? It's already in them. So I go to work with that mentality. I literally say a prayer every morning. First of all, God, give me peace of mind, because, right, everything has to be started with peace, right? You know, and bless my hands that I may pull out the kingdom of God in these children. Help me love them well. I literally say that as I drive to work, out of my car, because you just don't know what they're dealing with, what is going on with them. But I want to bless my hands, call me spiritual, right? Says, got to bless my hands before I lay hands on this child, which you do, right? Every single day, I
yeah.
touch a child. Sometimes I'm one of the first people to touch a child at birth. Sometimes I'm one of the last people before a child passes away. So you can just tell the power,
Mm,
it's a position that is just not everybody is in that position. So I'll be a fool to not use it for my advantage in praying and blessing these kids. So, because anytime I see them, they really do light me up, because almost like I see these are the children of God. What does the kingdom of God mean to us? Like power, hope, refreshment, gifts, creativity, like love. All of those things is what we call the kingdom of God, right? So I just see them and I'm like, let me be a part of those who pull that out of this kid. And my
mm,
interaction then goes back to normal, like whatever they came in for. But at least I have prayed, my hands are blessed, and I listen to their heart with intention, right? Because I know my hands are
mm.
already blessed. So that's a high for me, because I feel like I'm just in a perfect position to pray over these kids that I might not know anything about. Um, Lowe's is rooted in the healthcare system. Like, there's so much bureaucracy, politics. America's a capitalist country, insurance company, big pharma. All of these people are what are now directing the way we practice medicine. So all the physicians in general are kind of upset and want to go away from it, because they're not free to practice medicine perfectly, right? The way they would like to. Insurance company are telling you what to prescribe. They won't pay for certain tests because it doesn't profit them. So that's a frustration in the day-to-day practice that I think is a low. And also, just a low for me is when these kids just end up in bad situations, because I can't catch everything, right? And I've missed child abuse cases. I've lost kids. Like, how do you recover from that kind of stuff? So that has to be a
Mm.
low. It doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, it knocks me down for a few days. And then I have to get back up again and think about all the other good things that one could accomplish, right? Overall, that's kind of the highs and lows of the field in general, but definitely the highs outweigh the lows, or else I wouldn't be doing this, right? Yeah.
So I'm going to pick back to the things that, as a doctor, what you can catch and how you can save a child that's probably going through abuse in a
Mhm.
bit. But how do you balance motherhood and your career? Because it is a demanding career. And, spoken for hours sometimes when you're just really pouring out your heart on the pressure and the stress that
Yeah.
comes with being in this important role. But how would you now balance motherhood, which is also another important role, and being a doctor?
Call your sister.
Wahala for
all,
who don't have sister. Hey.
all jokes aside, since all jokes aside, I mean, you have to have an out, because I feel like balance is, what is balance, right? It's a moving target for me, to be honest with you. There are some days I
Mhm,
give 80%. Most times I even give a lot more at work than I give at home, right? It's just the nature of the kind of
mhm,
job I have. And when I'm on call, you have to go out, drop everything you're doing and go to the hospital. Like, you can't control
mhm,
some things. But man, you have to have an outlet. Some people call that therapy, which is good. For me, you, mom, definitely an outlet for me. And the biggest stressors on the home front, I feel like, I lack time to do, is the cooking, laundry, the cleaning, those things that we need to do, but it's just time. Outsource it, right? And thank God, to be
mhm.
financially able to do that is a blessing, to just pay people to do these things for you. So the time you do have, you spend on your kids. So yeah, I,
Absolutely.
I, I don't even think I can answer that question perfectly. It's a moving target on the day to days, honestly. But I do have a good support system, which I joke about, but it's real. that definitely encourages me and pushes me through the day to day. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think a lot of women now are coming to terms with letting go of that mom guilt of, oh, you're not this
Hmm.
Stepford wife that cooks everything, that makes a pie or
It's
bakes
a
this
lie.
or wears pearls. It's impossible, especially this day and age where we've got demanding careers. So you need to
Yeah.
outsource things. You need to outsource cooking if possible. You need to outsource cleaning so that the time you have, you can spend quality
Mm-hmm.
time with your children. Because imagine having to spend 3 hours
100%.
doing laundry and ironing clothes when
Unfolding.
that 3 hours you could have actually spent quality time with your child. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think
absolutely.
women are beginning to accept that, you know what, this is the norm, as opposed to feeling guilty about things like that. I think this
Yeah,
is what is happening, and this is what I'm
100%.
catching from conversations. Okay,
And
I think I heard a quote once that's from Michelle Obama. She said, "A woman can have it all if she wants, but not at the same time. You can have it all,
that's
but not
good.
at once."
That's
Do
good.
you? What do
Yeah.
you think about that quote? What do you agree with it? Do you partially agree with it? What do you think?
Whew. So, when you were saying that, I was thinking in my mind of people I know that during the childbearing age did not work, right? And after their
Yeah.
kids were in first grade or primary one, you would say, would go back to work. That just was popped in my mind, right? Because they spend those 5 years, 6 years at home with the kids,
Hmm.
informative years, crucial years, and then they go back to work. So that really sounds like a perfect scenario in my head. But obviously, I agree with her, with her because I feel like even if so, let me say this is I might not you cannot have it 100%, right? But your kids could have it relatively close to that, right?
Hmm.
So I'm not going to be under 100% the best mom, right? Because I'm working. But what does my kid
Right.
receive? Like 100% of me in a 15 minutes block, right? Or 30-minute block in a day, right? When I'm gone, what is my child still receiving? 100% of good care, nutrition, safety, all of that stuff. You're not providing it, but somebody else is, right?
Yeah.
So it's still close to 100% of what that child needs, but not 100% of you as a mom every time.
Yeah.
So that's kind of
Yeah.
the other way I'm thinking about it. Other than that, it's you being home for a few years and then going back to work after they're in school. But it's a true statement for sure.
It is. And you know what? That would have even been perfect if the workplace is receptive to
Mm.
moms. One thing that a lot of people I'm finding out is that you take that time off and it's difficult to get back in.
Rebecca,
It's
yeah,
difficult to get back in because people don't consider being a stay-at-home mom as a proper job, of which
which
being a
is which is
stay-at-home mom
there.
is harder. I don't want to say it's worse, but it's harder. Like you clock in a
Hmm.
lot of hours doing different things, multitasking,
Yeah.
planning, doing so many transferable skills, I think. But the workplace is very, very cutthroat. So even moms
Hmm.
that take that time off to say, okay, let me spend quality time with my children during the early years, they are finding it so difficult to get back
To
to
get
work.
back, yeah. Yeah, it's a constant battle. But one thing, the old dichotomy of working mom, stay home mom. I was looking at the research one time like that of the what affects kids, like the influence in
Mhm.
kids, right? Is it a working mom or a stay home mom? It's actually none of those two things. It's a happy mom, right? Because if you're
Mm.
happy, you're giving your best. This is research, which is not just me talking. It's actually research from it's the Ohio
Mm.
State University. So it's like I think they had like I don't know how many thousands of adults that they followed to see from birth infancy to 30. So it's a good amount of
Yeah.
time. And it shows that the people that actually were happiest, less stress, showed less like psychosomatic symptoms of stress, actually were not as hostile, had good work relationship, were the people who had extravagant affection and nurture from their mothers. And their mothers were happy,
Mm.
not if they were working or if they were home. So it's important to know that
Mm.
you have to just be happy with whichever one you decide to do. It's what matters most when it comes to the kids we're talking. Kids in general. So yeah, that's for sure. Whatever you decide, just be
That
happy doing
is
it.
such a good point.
Yeah.
Girls, I told you my sister was gonna bring this.
No,
I
stop
told you
it.
my sister was gonna bring this. So, sis, you're telling me recently about a brilliant talk you did about adverse childhood experiences, and in other
Hmm.
words, things that happen in early years that has a potential to affect children's life in a significant way. So, can you just
Yeah.
shed a light on what that talk was about?
The talk was based on research that was done in the 1990s. It was done like Kaiser Permanente is this huge group of hospitals, and then the CDC, the US, Center of Disease Control, they took like 17,000 adults, retrospective study, and looked back, right, into their childhood, just kind of see how certain events affect them as adults. So those events are what we call, in short, we call them ACEs, right? Adverse childhood events. But there are certain things that, a lot of things happen, but the ones that were studied were particularly for physical abuse, right? Physical abuse was physical, sexual, or emotional. And then another category was neglect, emotional or physical neglect. And then there was a category for household dysfunction, domestic violence, substance abuse in the home, a parent being incarcerated, divorce. There were 5 groups: substance abuse, domestic violence, a parent being incarcerated, divorce, and there's a 5th one I'm blanking out on. Mental illness, yes, that's a big one actually. So those were the 5 household dysfunction. So that was the question I was asked about their childhood. So the study essentially just showed that about 70% of the population, this was pre-pandemic, by the way, had some kind of ACE, right? And they also found out that it was cumulative, right? In the sense that if you had 2 or 3 or 4, your risk of adverse things as adults would increase because of the amount of things that happen to you as a child. So now let's go back to why is childhood. When I say childhood, they say the first 5 years really, or they say the first 1,000 days, which is 3 years. Anyway, within that time frame of birth to 5, right? And what do we know that happens developmentally is brain. The brain grows 80% in those first 3 years of life. This is why, as a pediatrician, right, this is why we're optimizing nutrition, optimizing parent-child relationship, optimizing therapy, because we know that a lot of changes happen during that time, like critical period of life, essentially. If you don't get what you need at that time, you're essentially messed up for the rest of your life. It's like the blueprint of everything, those 5 years. So those kids have to be taken care of properly during that time. Anyway, so we've realized that negative experiences and positive experiences affect the brain significantly during that time. Unfortunately, this study was approaching the adverse influences on this child. And they actually found that to the microscopic level, looking at brain neurons, a child who was properly taken care of, and a child who was neglected, that they could see the connections in the brain, in the neurons, which are the brain cells, less on the child who was neglected as opposed to the child who actually had proper care. So in the microscopic level, we know this. And now there's even talk about epigenetics, right? Not necessarily DNA changing, but how DNA is expressed now that it's passed from generation to generation. So these things are not just happening to these kids and them and their life. It's affecting their DNA expression. And that's what they pass on too. Anyway, so to go back to the result of the study, they realized that people with 4 or more ACEs were, 4 times at risk for cardiopulmonary disease, 2 times at risk for suicide, at risk for substance abuse, poor relationship in their jobs. All of those things, essentially, brain development at a certain age is not properly established. And in the areas that was affected were mainly the prefrontal cortex, right? What does that do? Executive functioning, planning, impulse control. You see what I'm saying? And then the limbic system is emotional reward, right? The ability to have foresight and not just, no instant gratification. All that stuff are the main areas where toxic stress is affecting. There's a pediatrician. She's actually a pioneer in this area of child development, and she described it as our stress response, right? It's a natural thing the body has, evolutionarily we need for survival, right? We call the APA axis. When your body sees something and it decides, do I run or do I fight, right? So she
Fight or
described
flight.
Fight or flight, exactly. He starts going to the woods and you see a bear, like, do I fight this bear? What are my odds? Or do I run away, right? But once you're out of that situation, the body goes back to homeostasis, right? The body wants to always go back to homeostasis, whatever you call it, the high of food, high of sex, or whatever the case may be. It needs to go back to baseline. That's the adaptive functioning that we all go through on a daily basis. The problem is if that bear comes home every night and slaps your mom, comes home every night and punches you, comes home every night and puts its hand under your dress. So, right? So it's like the stress never gets turned off. It becomes an adaptive system that becomes maladaptive, right? And that's the high dose of cortisol that now affects these brain areas and affects prefrontal cortex, limbic system. And the issue is it's wired kind of for life, which is why it's critical period. The wiring for life doesn't really change. You can find a way to go through therapy and all of these things to help you. There are things we do for mental health in general, right? We could do this thing, but it's almost like this foundation is still there and you just have to be careful, right? Anyway, so that's essentially what the research talked about. And just to bring light to this issue. So now, as a pediatrician, this is why I don't want to do adult medicine, because I feel like I can't do anything but manage your illnesses, right? As a pediatrician, I can change something now before we start having issues. This is why I'm all about
Mm,
parental class. All of these things, people need to be prepared for parenthood, because it's not easy, even for those that don't have issues. It's not easy. So it's like I want to effect change now, and I want to remove a child from a messed up situation now when I still have the chance to rewire the brain a little bit. Does that make sense? So that's kind
absolutely.
of the foundation of
Absolutely.
it.
But then if you're saying 70%, about 70% pre-COVID, there's signs that
Uh,
we all have ACEs. So you can imagine that.
Post COVID, what that looks like. Yeah, I don't
Yeah, so you
know.
can imagine what most families look like for a child that is coming to the world. So I think at this point, probably one of the realistic things is obviously the emphasis of parenting classes, because some people
Mm-hmm.
have no clue, and they, or maybe even
Mm-hmm.
teen pregnancies, teenagers that are still teenagers that are becoming parents. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just kind of mitigating those areas, because realistically everyone is probably going to have some trauma or the other. But I think
Mm-hmm.
with what you've said, those extremes like the neglect, the sexual abuse, the mental illness, and how that impacts children, that's where I guess people, caregivers, and people that could be like, if we notice something as like an abuse or situation, we have to
Mm-hmm.
just speak out about it, because a child cannot speak
Absolutely.
for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So, what you just discussed about creating a safe, stable, nurturing environment, how do
Mhm.
we do that when some of us still have our own issues and trauma that we're dealing with on a daily basis?
Let me speak to myself personally in a way that I always thought that things had to be perfect for me to function properly. Does that make sense? That I
Yeah.
cannot do what I'm supposed to do until I've figured out my own things, which is a lie, right? Because nobody is without some kind of childhood trauma to some degree. I mean, I think we
Yeah.
had a relatively decent, satisfactory childhood, I would say, because we had grandma
Yeah.
who was always there. There was always a roof over our head. We always ate, even if it was on the mat. Three of us would sit down and eat something. You know what I'm saying? We had each other, we had grandma, our parents were working. So, I mean, everybody had some level of something that wasn't 100%, but you cannot be perfect until before you start trying to make effort, right? And the biggest thing,
Yeah.
somebody wise told me, is therapy is not just for yourself, right? It's for your kids, my sister. So we can't be selfish about therapy, because it's not just for us. It's because it
Mm-hmm.
affects our member, happy mother, happy
Happy
child,
child.
right?
Yeah.
Less anxious child as an adult, So it's not just for us, it's for them too. So we kind of have to start therapy in some sort while you still try to parent. It's not going to be perfect,
Mm-hmm.
but you are constantly working on yourself and you're trying. Oh, and what you did with your story for the week was brilliant, right? Number one, you've taught your child that a word is bad, right? So he's aware. Yes, being able to identify a bad word. The person who taught him uttered that bad word, and he checks mom. What did mom say? She didn't say shut up and get in the car, like most African mothers would do. Am I lying? It's like we
No, no,
dismiss
no,
it.
you're not lying. We have to be honest. This was what it was growing up. The adult is
Yeah,
never
shut up
wrong,
and
and the
down, sit
child
down
is
somewhere.
wrong.
Who
Yeah.
are you talking to me? How can you address? You know what I'm saying? That is what African parenting was like. But the humility you showed, and the courage, you acknowledge your own faults. You said, "Oh, your fault. The way you feel shouldn't make you say these words." And I'm sorry that I said this. I mean, sis, that is beautiful. You have no idea the connections you've made in that child's head. Now he would not be one that would not ignore, that would say, ignore his own faults. It's right. He will acknowledge it and apologize. It's like you saw something, you processed it and you resolved it. This is exactly what I'm talking about: brain connectivity, and these kids building resilience and learning that mom will still love me even if I say a bad word. Like you just highlighted everything plain for him to see. So it's brilliant. I have to give kudos for that. It's just brilliant, because that's exactly what we need them to do. Stable, nurturing, loving relationship doesn't mean you don't discipline, right? You don't correct. You just have to do it within an environment that is safe and stable for them to have their process and overcome, right, obstacles, and then be on the other side. So when they see the next one, they will go through the same process again, and their stress response will be appropriately high, but it'll go back down and go back to homeostasis, right? That's the kind of the goal, not
Mm.
maladaptively just firing because mom is gonna slap me. Mom's gonna throw me out in the rain. I will not eat for 5 days.
For example, a child that is constantly abused will grow up to be an adult that either abuses or is in an
Mm-hmm.
abusive relationship and thinks
Mm-hmm.
it's okay to be abused because growing up, that was what he saw
What was
as
spelled
love.
out for them. Yeah. Yep.
That was
100%.
what so it goes through abuse as a child, finds an abusive, toxic relationship, stays there, probably gets pregnant, has another child that sees
In the
and
same scenario.
witnesses
Mm-hmm.
the abuse, and then it's just like this is the norm. And if
And
they
you
even meet a
realize,
good person,
mm-hmm.
they won't it won't feel normal. If a person is good to them, it doesn't feel normal. It feels abnormal. So they are
Mm-hmm.
more familiar and more comfortable with the toxic, highly abusive environment.
Sometimes they do this without consciousness too, which is another
Hmm.
powerful thing that therapy also brings to the surface. No one, they're not even aware of the behavioral pattern because
Yeah.
it's just that's just how the brain works. So this is like really, really crucial stuff that I feel like everybody needs to be aware of, just so we can do better for the
Mhm.
next generation of kids. Which we know for sure that they will have other challenges with way in, technology is going, right. Only God knows what
Yeah,
kind of challenge they will have in the future. But I think the premise and the background, the principles still stay the same. Right? We are really just modeling good behavior and doing the best to provide safety for the kids.
exactly. Now that you touched on that, I've recently started therapy, and one thing therapy does is it actually brings some of this
Mm,
trauma to the surface, right? I was
yeah.
telling you, but I'll share this with our listeners as well that, but normally, your sister, I'm like the tough on the exterior, don't not, I'm hard on the surface, a
Feisty.
bit like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then my first session, I cried like a baby. I cried. And I was thinking, where are all these emotions coming from? And some of these things that I was talking about happened over 20 years, 25 years ago. And it just shows, even going back to what you said about even those early years and childhood
Mm-hmm.
experiences, it felt like if it happened yesterday because the pain was
Mm,
still very raw. So it's almost
wasn't
like if I
addressed.
just
Yeah.
kind of pushed it to one side. I'm not sure the medical term of what that was. I just pushed it to one side and you just carried on. But as soon as you bring, it's like opening Pandora's box, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, those emotions felt very real. But it just got to a point where I felt that, okay, there is the self awareness, there is the work that a person can do on their own to actually
Mm-hmm.
be a better parent and a better person. But there is also something that you need professional help for, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this is
Mm-hmm.
where I think that even in the Black community, we need to actually talk about therapy more and how important therapy is, not just for
Mm-hmm.
you, but also for those around you, right? So how
Yeah.
does one
I
even start to deal with this, sis?
so I don't know what about our culture that thinks mental health is for the weak. Like mental health issues is for the week. I don't, you know what I'm talking about, like depression,
Yeah.
anxiety. People would say you're not praying enough, you're not reading your Bible enough. These are the same people that cause your trauma. Anyway, that's besides the point. For me, it's even a situation where I'm actually trying to see the way I see other health issues, right? Because people go annually for checkups, right? Just to make sure everything is working properly in your body, right? Why don't we do that
Mhm.
for our mental health too? So we absolutely have to see the same way as you don't have to be in a dire situation to seek therapy, right? It's almost like then you'll be playing catch up. Like
Right.
seeking therapy is something that we should do on a daily, not on a daily basis, like routinely before, so we don't find ourselves in a position where we're playing catch up. But I think post pandemic, people are now getting to realize, okay, this is something that we need. The Black community is catching up a little bit. I think we're kind of behind the ball in these things. I don't know how it is where you are, but resources are not there. So that doesn't help. And it's
Mm.
expensive. That doesn't help. But one thing I feel like we had too growing up that maybe we didn't think it was that powerful was a communal living, right?
Yeah.
Talk to each other, live together, like family will come greet you, bow when you've not heard from you for a while, that kind of thing. Thing also builds, resilience and sense of safety and comfort too. That I think helped us a little bit growing up. But nowadays, nobody got time for nobody. So, but then you have to seek it out. So if you don't, even if professional help is not accessible for some people because of the financial part of it, got to seek out good company, right? So people find out in church, find out in solid friendship, find out in good co-workers, whatever, you got to seek good company. You got to have someone that will, give you advice, someone that will tell you, you got to have that around you. So in general, I think we need to do better because nobody's an island. That's a huge lie. Nobody lives life in isolation. Nobody raises kids in isolation. All of these things are all interconnected, and we have to seek it out for ourselves. If not, you, you just find yourself in a situation where you're now seeking therapy for almost like a diagnosis when you could have prevented it by routinely trying.
Absolutely. I like how you made the reference to our physical health, because the same
Mm-hmm.
way we have headaches, the same way we have like
Mm-hmm.
a condition
The
when we
stomach
take
bug,
medicine,
yeah.
the
Mm-hmm.
bug, we go take medicine, we go, we see the doctor. It's just that our brain, our mental health is also equally important. And someone once referred to trauma like scars, that there's literally no way you can go through life without having some sort of scar, one way or
Yeah.
the other. Just like you have a
Oh, yeah.
physical scar, it heals, then but there's a
Yeah.
mark, there's a scar to tell you that okay, this thing happened. But then if
Yeah.
you have the right help and you were able to deal with that trauma, then you carry on. It doesn't mean that it's not there and you don't remember it from time to time,
Mm-hmm.
but you carry on. Just like you will carry on if you have a wound or whatever, physical illness, or even just a
Mm-hmm.
physical wound,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the issue is just because for a long time, like you said, it has been such a taboo topic. And I think we
Mm-hmm.
didn't even have the right words to even say, okay, this is a mental health issue. We don't even know
Yeah.
anything about trauma growing up, right? So we just
Yeah.
know that, okay, if someone says something, this one, she just slashes out, this one, it is this one is always angry, but this one,
Yeah.
you see all these things now, and you start connecting and making dots. Or
And
there
this
are
is
certain people
why.
that would
Yeah.
not, they are perpetually afraid of being poor, perpetually afraid of something, and they would
Yeah.
hang on to things, and it's acting almost irrationally in a way, but there is a reason why they are that way, so
Yeah.
everything is all it starts making sense now because we started
Yeah.
doing the work and
Yeah.
connecting the dots.
Yeah. And the goal is to be better parents. I think our parents did the best they could with what they had, right? With the understanding. So
Yeah.
the goal is now our job to be, now do better with what we know and what we understand so that our kids could
Yeah,
do better and break patterns like
exactly.
this So yeah, 100%.
Now, let's go back to the adverse childhood effect that we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about. What are some of the signs you can see as a responsible adult? Like if you notice, say, for example, I'm a teacher, so I'm obviously exposed
Mm-hmm.
to kids every day. What are some
Mm-hmm.
things to look out for to know that so we can help and support a child that is going through this situation?
When I say mandatory reporter, I think as a school teacher, you're a mandatory reporter, right? Like, you know what that
Yeah.
means. Like, okay. So there are certain people that work with kids that are mandatory reporters in a situation if you recognize. So for me, I mean, there's some subtle signs that could point to, like, I would say maybe emotional or physical, like neglect that's, it's not abuse, but parent is just not giving the child what they need. And these kids act out more in essence to seek attention. The kids are
Mm,
angry. They fail classes. Some of them are overly attached to strangers. Some of them are withdrawn. So those are some subtle signs you would notice, which make you want to probe. And probing, asking questions is as simple as, did you have breakfast this morning? Did you eat dinner last night? To see if there's any food insecurity in the family, or where do you sleep? Do is there room for like creativity to love and learn? But you find ways to just ask the child that to see what's actually going on. And some of these things are more education for the parents, right? Not everything is like a big, take the child away. Some of these things is social
yeah.
service education, help parents be better parents, right? So it could be
Yeah.
as simple as that. You would just notice change in patterns. Oh, there's a death in the family or a divorce, and the child begins to act out. That's a very common thing we would see in the classroom. And sometimes the parents will bring them to me because the child is now setting things on fire or breaking things, anger outbursts out of proportion. I'm talking about these are neurotypical kids, right? These are not kids with like autism or any other diagnosis, right? These are neurotypical kids without any other issues. Will act out more in this way. Even for the kids that are what we call neurodivergent, right? The kids that are autistic or have ADHD or have some syndrome or something. Those kids will even act out more than their baseline too. So it's also a thing that you could pay attention there. But for physical abuse, I mean, there are certain signs you would see, like when it comes to bruises, right? Man, I search these kids like close off because I can do that right in the physician's office. Close off, and I'm looking as I'm having conversation with the parents. First of all, I even assess the parents before as I walk into the room. Is I look at you and almost like see, because honestly, my assessment of a child starts with a parent to see what kind of person you are. Do you smell like alcohol? Do you
Cigarette.
smell like cigarette? Exactly. Do you look like you have meth teeth? Like all of that assessment is happening in my head. When I touch the child, bruises, any bruises in a child less than 4 months is questionable, right? As a mandatory reporter, you report not because you know for sure. You report because you suspect. That's all you have to do. You're not a detective. You're reporting because you're concerned. There could be nothing there, but I'd rather have there be nothing there than one miss something dire, right? So bruises in
Mm,
any child less than 4 months is no, because those kids cannot even roll. I've had a 2-month-old child coming with bruises, and the mom told me the child rolled and fell down. How does a 2-month-old roll and fall down? Because developmental, they're
Mm,
not supposed to do that yet. So when the story doesn't match the development, suspicion, right? And
mm.
there's certain areas of the body that you should not really see bruises, right? Then there's a mnemonic that might help. It's called 10-4. 10 is like torso, right? Torso, ears. You shouldn't see bruises on the ears. You shouldn't see bruises on the neck, because these are areas that actually require intentional impact for you to get those areas. Because if a child falls, for instance, you will see, not maybe they fall, their elbow gets hurt, their knee gets hurt. Like bony prominences will have bruises. When you see bruises on abdomen, chest, that's should be protected naturally by your arms, that is suspicious. Obviously, white of the eye, you should not see a blood spot in the white of the eye for no reason. The mouth should not have injury for no reason. Talked about the ears already. So things like that just have to watch for, and know, the story has to match up the injury. That's another thing. If if somebody comes in and has a mark on the face, and you ask the teacher, what happened to your face? And they said, oh, I slept too much, or I slept rough. And you see a fingerprint. You see how it does not make sense.
Yeah.
And you have to watch patterns too, like belt marks, cigarette burn. There's so many crazy things
Why
I've
would
seen.
anyone use a cigarette burn to burn a child?
Please, you have
Like,
no
how is
idea.
that a thing? Like, isn't that for like a history or something? Like, I don't know.
This this
Anyway.
this one there's this one I saw that the hands and the feet had blood spots. We get blood spots from pressure, right? You know what I mean by blood spots, right? So the
Oh,
explanation was the child put his hand on the door and somebody mistakenly smacked the door, right? And
yeah.
created the blood spot. Why does a child put fingers and feet on the creases of a door,
Okay,
right?
yeah, that's not possible. Because how would
That's
they
not
hang? Like, yeah.
exactly. So that was a authorities report report, right? And then for sexual abuse, I have to, most cases you don't even see evidence of it.
See, that's the
Older
worst one
kids,
because it's hidden and the child is too
exactly.
young to say.
To
And even
say
children that are older, they've already been coached to the point that they think,
yes,
or coached or manipulated to the point that it's like they won't say because they think it's their fault or something else. So
yeah.
that is actually the worst one because that you can't really know except someone opens up to say sometimes.
Sometimes you could see like a torn hymen, right? I'm in a
Yeah,
position
but
to
that would
check.
be just as a doctor.
That'll be as for me. So that's the only way, because there's some kids you should always see the hymen in place. How about that? So anytime you see
Yeah.
anything suspicious there. But for the grown teenagers and things, you can't tell because they're already, going through puberty, and most of the time sometimes estrogen would have lubricated the place. So it's just, oh man, this is the difficult part of the job. But we are constantly scanning, constantly looking, and it's easy for me because I see these kids regularly, and as a anyone in childcare should always just be, to pay attention to these things, changing behavior, failing school, weird bruises, limping child. Just probe a little bit more, and if you get enough that suspicion, then you have to make a report. And parents might be upset
Definitely.
with you, but I rather would have them be upset with me than my child being in a toxic stress scenario that would grow up to be somebody that cannot keep relationships, cannot keep a job, that is now drinking,
Mm.
now has liver problems, needs liver transplant, and cannot get it and dies. You see what I'm saying? Right? Please be mad at
Yeah.
me. I'd rather be mad at me than in that scenario, because that's a child's life that's messed up for the rest of their life, right?
Yeah, err
So,
on the side of caution, as I say, err on the side of caution. I think parenting classes should actually be mandatory,
oh my
like
gosh, this.
because everyone's coming in with different ideas. There should be a basic, a foundation. There should be like a
Hmm.
standard basis foundation. And this is not even like a US thing or UK thing or Nigerian thing. I think parenting classes this day and age should just be mandatory
It needs to. I don't
because a
know.
lot of parents now don't even have time. They're just online, they're on the internet, they're addicted to their phones. So there is that layer of technology and the impact of how
Mhm.
our world is now added on top of the challenges of
Yeah.
parenting. Some children are neglected because a lot of parents are actually now addicted to their phones, and
Yeah,
it's
I
like
think
you have to,
emotional neglect is understated,
yeah.
definitely understated, because there are worse things, right? And we forget the subtleties of interaction, like drop your phone, sit on the mat, and be the same level with your child and watch them do
Mhm.
something. Engage them in doing that, even if it's for a short amount of time. It's crucial. I think if you're not thinking about it, I mean, I'm guilty as charged too. Instagram scrolling at the end of a work day.
Yeah,
you
because
know,
you're tired. Yeah, you're
Yes,
tired.
exactly. So I have to consciously say, I think I became more aware of it now with 2 kids. I mean, since you have 3, so you probably would have, you're more intentional. Of okay, I'm breastfeeding. Okay, but Elijah is acting up right now. I have to sit down, and do Play-Doh with him
Mm-hmm.
for a little bit. And he's very excited when that happens. It's like, oh, mommy, come on, daddy, come on. I've done more
Mm-hmm.
school activities the past couple months because I have more time. And I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
these are the things I'm missing out on because I've just been working, but
Yeah.
you got to do what you got to do.
You get it exactly. No, but this is where when I was going back to parenting classes, if there is awareness of the importance of just having that face to
Mm-hmm.
face, being on the same level with your child sitting down, the importance of them having your voice constantly, your
Mm,
hearing, recognizing your voice with the baby. So then we have that background knowledge. So then as life gets tough and things get busy, we have
so
that
able to
knowledge to say,
prioritize.
okay,
Yeah.
this is still important. But then if you don't even know in the first place, it's like, okay, you're just kind of winging it and just going like, so this is where I think
Yeah.
is definitely yeah, I think parenting classes, even if it's online, I don't know how
Mm-hmm.
that could pan out because obviously different countries have
Yeah.
different
Different rules.
systems. But
Yeah.
yeah, the increase in abuse, neglect, issues, teenagers with mental health problems, because they
Mm-hmm.
have all this, right? As during the early childhood, the first 5 years,
Yeah.
then I see them with the teenagers because I'm teaching teenagers at the moment, and it
Yeah.
is just mind blowing the level of
Yeah.
neglect I've noticed because they constantly want to tell me everything. They want to talk to me. They want to. It's
Oh.
like they're missing that interaction, right? And then when
Yeah.
they're home, they distract them the discomfort of their emotions with TikTok. So they can be on TikTok for like no seriously, they can be on TikTok for
Yeah.
like 8 hours. I ask them how long are you on TikTok? They're on TikTok for 8 hours a day.
Oh man.
So it's like, where exactly are they having that social interaction that they need? So that is an added layer. So obviously, I'm getting the point from you with in terms of the early years. So imagine if
Mm-hmm.
everything goes smooth and sailing, there's no issues with trauma. Then they get
Mm-hmm.
to school. Then that's a
Mm,
different ball game with bullying and stuff. Then they become teenagers, and there's the pressure on online as well. There's the
mm-hmm.
online pressure where they're constantly their brain is constantly stimulated. Their brain is constantly like, with the like I don't know what the medical terms are, but when they're constantly like seeing short videos, they don't
Mm-hmm.
know how to switch off. So I give them like an essay to read, and they can't even read an essay
Oh
because they
man.
just use short, sharp videos. Or
Mm-hmm.
it's like so
Attention
it's
span is
the
depreciated.
attention span is so short these days. And every teacher we were discussing this. A lot of teachers said it wasn't this way before pandemic. It wasn't as bad
Mm-hmm.
as this, but
Yeah.
now the kids' attention span is so short. So there is that level as well that is added to this. So I think one of the only ways to start mitigating is definitely including parenting classes. And people
Yeah.
that are even veteran parents, like people that have had children for 5 years or more, they can still take those classes, not only for new parents.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we get
Yeah.
licensed to drive a car. Why don't you get licensed to parent? You know,
Exactly. Wow. Think about that, right?
it's
Which is one of the
true.
most important role we do. We get
Yep.
training for everything else. We get training to be project manager, training to be a doctor, training, and then no training whatsoever to be a
In,
parent.
you know, back in the day when things were more traditional, right? Roles were more traditional, not as emergent as we
Yeah.
currently, I think some people would say they spend their life being trained and parenting based on their parents. That's
Yeah, because you
provided
see
there's
it.
no
It's in your
dysfunctionality, though. That's provided
yeah.
there's no dysfunctionality, right? So I guess you could say that could be the training ground. That's if everything was handy dandy. But that's not the reality right now.
So we have to adapt to the current times. I think we haven't caught on to that. And this is where
Mm-hmm.
I think healthcare practitioners like yourself, maybe if there's like conferences or meetings, I don't know how these things are decided, but the world is moving at such a rapid pace and
Yeah,
we've changed. Traditional roles are not like, as you said before. So we're not
yeah.
seeing that modeling. Like we're not living with our grandparents down the street, right? We're not living with our auntie down the street. Everyone is kind of
Mm-hmm.
apart these days. So there has to be a new roadmap, a new model on how to do this parenting thing. Otherwise, a lot of people are winging it. Those with the best intentions are winging it with the best intentions, and those that
Intentions,
don't know,
yeah.
don't know. Those that don't know, don't know. So the
This.
person, the recipients of the
Mhm.
bad parents are the children.
So I mean, you can't boil an ocean, right? Like it's the problem seems so big. But what I do
Right.
know is that if I have my own little pot of water in front of me, I'm gonna boil it, right? So this is
Yeah.
why every single parent that comes my way, they get some kind of talk. And I'm not even talking as okay, I got it figured together. I'm just telling them the fact because as a medical professional, I cannot just say things on opinion. I have to have backing. So I discuss research with research article. This is what we found out. This is a recommendation based on what we found out. So I'm trying to each
Mm.
visit, newborn, 2 weeks, 2 months, 4 months, as I'm seeing them, and I'm checking developmental milestones. We're discussing what are we doing after work, So those things so that's how I'm boiling my own ocean. So I feel like everybody's fear is influence has to try, because education is
Yeah,
constant, right? And you actually have to make the effort so we can catch people, make people actually, aware of these things and they're thinking about it. Because if you don't think about it, you won't do it. Honestly, it's an effort to
exactly.
get out of the couch and go sit down and say I want to draw with my child at the end of the day. But I know I
Hmm.
need to do that. And I
Yeah.
know I have lots of information in my head. I actually know better. But sometimes I just rather lie down.
Demands of a demanding career. Totally understand.
We can
Like you said, the education sector is one, the healthcare sector is another. It's just having that cohesiveness and just deciding, that, okay, this is something that we need to do moving forward.
one thing I would say is these kids are very resilient. I know I'm talking about the bad
Yeah.
stuff, but kids are strong. And it really just takes a little effort, honestly, sis, to get them in, at this stage, it takes a little effort to get them in a little effort constantly. Let me rephrase. A little effort constantly to get them, on the right path. So, because it might feel so overwhelming. Okay, I'm going to have to do this, 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 this. But these kids are strong. And I know I get spiritual, but we got to pray for them. We have to.
Yeah.
There's so many gaps that we can't cover, even as the best of parents. There's so many influences outside of you as a parent, in
Yeah.
school, in the neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? Friends online. So there's just so much you can control too, that you just
Yeah.
got to do your best and then, lay hands on them kids. And,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing and thank you for the tips that you gave us regarding how to notice if a child may be in distress or going through abuse. Thank you for sharing your experience on motherhood, your career, and just being here with us today. We really appreciate it. So we
oh,
have a
thank you.
tradition on the podcast, and I would start a sentence, and you have to just end the sentence with what rings true for you, right? So, being a mom has done what for you?
Whew. It has taught me to trust God more. Yeah, for sure. To trust God more because there are gaps I can't fill.
When do you feel the happiest?
Oh, when I'm with family. Oh, remember last year at Dad's 70th? Like, I just love being around my siblings. I love the fact that our parents, are together and there. That's when I actually feel the happiest. It's so unfortunate that we're so spread out. But, I enjoy our Zoom calls. It's honestly, family is it. So yeah, that's when
Family is it.
I'm
Just to
definitely
give
my happiest.
my listeners some context, so my sister is in the United States. I'm based in Dubai. My brother is in the UK, and then we have another brother in Nigeria. So we're really
Mhm.
spread out. We're not in the same place. So this is why it's really tough sometimes.
Yeah.
And the final question is, if you could tell 5-year-old Shola something, what would you tell her?
Whew. Um, I would say don't accept no for something that I stood you yes on. I would say that,
Hmm.
which I believe is what led me to this point in my life, because God had told me yes in medicine, but I got so many no's. So we think if it's something that it's a dream and it's something that God has given to you, you will feel like it will be easy. It's quite the opposite. So I would say that, and I also tell myself, because it's something I'm still, struggling with, being vulnerable here, the whole idea of imposter syndrome, right? I will tell myself, don't forget that you're powerful. Like, don't forget that you got this. Don't forget who you are, right? Because there are
Hmm.
moments in life that I'm like, I struggle with that. But yeah, definitely say, don't accept the no from something that you got a yes from God, and then don't forget how powerful you are as a mother, as a wife, as a friend, as a sister. All that is, powerful position. Forget it.
Oh, sis, I wish I could give you a hug from the screen. But thank you so much for joining us today. It's
Thank
been
you.
a
This was
pleasure.
awesome. Thank you for letting me ramble about some of my passions in life. It was really, really fun.